Like so many movies and TV series, the new Batman cartoon, Batman Caped Crusader, is set during the early days of Batman's crime-fighting career. As such, it parallels 1987's seminal Batman comic book storyline Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. The most obvious plot point is that the Gotham City Police Department is hostile towards Batman and they try to capture him. However, where the show differs from the comic book is in the role of James Gordon. In Year One, James Gordon was a fresh transfer to Gotham City, and he was one of the few honest cops in the department. He was given the task of arresting Batman because his superiors believed he would fail, which would then give them grounds to dismiss him. However, in Caped Crusader, Jim Gordon is already the boss. Now that doesn't mean he has full autonomy to do whatever he pleases. He still reports to Mayor Jessup, who is undeniably corrupt. As arguably the most honest cop in Gotham, Gordon was hired as commissioner to silence critics of the GCPD and get the mayor some good publicity. The expectation is that he will follow orders from the mayor, which he does, somewhat begrudgingly. Now, it's not entirely clear why Gordon's hiring would win the mayor points with the press. Some have suggested that Gordon was a diversity hire, but that doesn't ring true to me in the context of the show. No, it feels more like Gordon was given the role because he was viewed as a capable and fair officer of the law, and it was hoped that his image would transfer over to the entire department. After all, he was a beat cop in the worst part of town and was intimately familiar with the people that lived there. He cared about his community, and it showed in his work. When Firebug burns down an apartment building in the episode Night of the Hunters, Gordon goes in head first because he knows the layout of the building, likely because he had been there many times as part of his beat. I may be ignorant to how police departments work, but I don't think the head of police is usually on the front lines risking his own safety. That's what regular officers are for. But Commissioner Gordon doesn't think twice about endangering himself. It's true that he wants to stop Batman. The mayor had been pressuring him to get results, and he had been embarrassed earlier by stumbling across Batman reading their intel on him in their anti-Batman strike team control room. But as soon as he sees children that need saving, he sets all that aside and works with Batman. Innocent people's lives are more important than currying favour with the mayor. This episode also goes to show how little agency Gordon has. When he tries to fire Bullock and Flass after they had released Firebug in an attempt to lure out Batman, and then murdered him, one call from Mayor Jessup puts a stop to all that, and the two are promoted to the heads of the anti-Batman strike team. This scene demonstrates that in reality, Commissioner Gordon has no say over what goes on in his department, and that ruthless cruelty will be rewarded over honesty and loyalty. He had deliberately chosen Renee Montoya as the lead of his anti-Batman strike force because she was a capable and honest detective, someone he could count on to do the right thing. But Mayor Jessup undid that with a single phone call. I recently discussed how the character of Renee Montoya as the head of the anti-Batman strike team acted as a substitute for Detective Gordon in Caped Crusader. So go watch that video if the subject interests you at all. I have linked to it in the info button in the top right corner. We mostly see Commissioner Gordon angrily filling in paperwork in his office, often well into the night. But that doesn't mean that he is a stuffy pencil pusher. The episode Moving Target gives us some insight into his philosophical views on crime and punishment. While his daughter, Barbara, is a public defender who argues that the shades of grey should be considered when determining a sentence, her father is more straightforward. In his view, there's right and there's wrong, and people know the difference. They should be punished if they break the law. But I'm not so certain how infallible that belief is given his tolerance of Batman. Yeah, Mayor Jessup wants Batman off the streets, but Gordon can see the good he does on a daily basis. He saw Batman selflessly save those children from the burning building, with no concern for his own safety. He does things that the police aren't able, or in most cases, willing to do. And I think in some ways, after their first collaboration and how Jessup rewarded Bullock and Flass for their wrongdoing, Gordon understands why Batman is necessary. Similarly, when Barbara wins a case because his officers messed up during the arrest, he argues that his men were good cops that just made a mistake, and it should be disregarded. This causes Barbara to ask the pertinent question of why it's okay for police to make mistakes and be forgiven, but not okay for everyday people to make mistakes. While his philosophical take on crime and punishment doesn't really stand up to much scrutiny, we can't argue with his courage. When his life is threatened, he doesn't run or hide from the problem. Instead, he goes to his nice home in the suburbs and is ready to face whatever comes his way. However, when it is pointed out to him that his presence endangers his entire community, a single stray bullet could kill one of his neighbours, he agrees to be moved to a safe house. I find it interesting that this version of Commissioner Gordon lives out in the suburbs. The comic book Commissioner Gordon lived in the Tricorner section of Gotham, not too far from the police station. This gave him first-hand experience of the crime and the social rot, and helped explain why he felt so strongly about cleaning Gotham up. It was his home. Now, that's not to say that Caped Crusader's Gordon doesn't care. He clearly is very invested in improving Gotham. It's just that he didn't want to raise a family there. Barbara notes that she grew up in her grandfather's house in the suburbs, just outside of the city, on the other side of the river. Close enough to see the grot and the grime, but just far enough away to avoid being impacted by it too much. And I think that this explains the philosophical difference between the two. Commissioner Gordon worked long hours in the worst part of Gotham City, and was exposed to the absolute worst of human nature. And it would be hard for him not to react harshly to the crimes that took place there. Barbara, meanwhile, was raised on the outside, looking in, and she could take a more detached view on the issue of crime and punishment. But Moving Target is a great example of how corrupt the establishment of Gotham City really is. Bullock and Flass, the most corrupt officers in the GCPD, are outraged at the prospect of a civilian putting a hit out on an officer, even if they hate his guts. They propose unleashing the might of the Batman strike team on the citizens of the East End to beat information out of them. I find it interesting that they don't explicitly try to cash in on that bounty. I guess some things are more important than money. In this case, the fact that the GCPD should be above the everyday citizens, free to do as they please and when they please, without fear of recrimination. And yet, we can't rule out the possibility that one of them informed the hitman onomatopoeia of the safe house's location. Likewise, the temptation of the massive bounty was too much for one of Gordon's most trusted men to resist. Detective Corrigan had been presented as a reliable member of the team, working closely with Montoya in her attempts to capture Batman. So it was genuinely shocking for them to reveal that, firstly, the hit was never on Commissioner Gordon, it was on Barbara. And secondly, that he was going to kill her and claim the reward. It was simply too much money for him to resist. Commissioner Gordon was able to stop Corrigan in a very restrained way by shooting the pistol out of his hand, and ensured that he was punished appropriately. And that's a true demonstration of his character. One of his most trusted allies had attempted to murder his daughter, but he refrained from lashing out and ensured that Corrigan would go to prison, where I'm certain a dirty cop like him would have a terrible time. Gordon's next most significant story moment comes in the final episode, Savage Night, where he joins Batman, Montoya and Barbara in defending the disfigured Harvey Dent in an attempt to get him in front of a judge to testify against the corrupt officials in the city. This whole final act just oozes noir vibes, and the group sneak around the docks in the middle of the night encased in a dense fog. The gangster Rupert Thorne had sent more than a dozen of his men alongside Bullock and Flass to make sure to silence Dent, and the gang do their very best to prevent his murder. We also see Gordon and Montoya working closely with Batman, going as far as defending him after he took a nasty blow to the head. The most striking moment for me comes towards the episode's end, as Bullock and Flass descend on Barbara and Dent. While Commissioner Gordon is able to catch Bullock in the act, and is fully prepared to blow his corrupt brains out, he was not able to stop Flass from murdering Harvey Dent. Batman arrived a moment too late, but at least managed to save Barbara before intimidating Flass with his own gun. We know that Gordon was just around the corner the whole time, and likely had a decent view of what Batman was doing, and yet he did nothing to intervene. We just see him casually stroll up to Batman and tell him that he needs to get out of there before the rest of the police arrive, or we'll have to arrest him in order to maintain the pretense that he's trying to bring him in, before walking over to and comforting a distressed Barbara after Dent died in her arms. So, in summation, there are a couple of things that I find really interesting about Caped Crusader's version of James Gordon. Firstly, just because he's the commissioner, that doesn't mean that he's in control. He still reports to Mayor Jessup and has to satisfy his demands. He has very little agency over what goes on in his department, even when faced with overt criminality, like when Bullock and Flass released and murdered Firebug. He couldn't do anything about it, partly because Firebug was a disturbed nobody. Harvey Dent, meanwhile, was a respected, if somewhat damaged, former city official that had been on the way to uncover the corruption in the city. Would Bullock and Flass be able to get away with his murder? That remains to be seen. Given Gordon's lack of power, it's entirely understandable why he would be so amenable towards Batman. Batman doesn't have to worry about pleasing his superiors or bureaucracy or even the courts. He sees wrongdoers and puts a stop to them, often with his fists, which fits perfectly within Gordon's established world viewpoint of there being right and wrong with little middle ground. I'll be interested in seeing how Gordon and Batman's relationship develops in Season 2 of Caped Crusader. Will he continue to tolerate Batman, or will he be forced to actively try to bring him in by Mayor Jessup? We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, that's it for this video essay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd like to hear more about Batman Caped Crusader, why not check out our podcast Totally Shui Flipside, where my wife and I have gone through all 10 episodes. This is a spoiler-filled conversation about each episode in sequential order, so only check this out if you've watched the show or if you have no intentions of ever watching it yourself. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month, which will grant you early access to my video essays, and some supplementary perks like custom emojis, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, and community posts. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time I'm going to look at one of Batman's most reliable and effective tools in his war on crime, his butler, Pennyworth. While other versions of this character acted as a substitute father for Batman, this version was initially treated as a resource in Batman's arsenal, but over time would grow to become something more. And we're going to talk all about that. Hope to see you then.